Round and round and round they go. Where they stop, nobody cares. Welcome to the St. Canard Files, a Darkwing Duck podcast. I'm your host, Mike Russo, bringing you another bonus episode. August is a very busy month for us. Will has been out of town. He also has three conventions coming up this month. So he will be out of town 3 weekends in a row. So that kind of makes it hard for us to get together to record some Darkwing episodes. I know, we're almost done. We only have 3 more left, almost to the end, but we want to both be on all 3 of those, so we don't want to, rush things. So we figured a few more bonus episodes. You guys have been there before. You can wait it out with us too. What we wanted to do, we had talked about discussing the Chaos God saga from the newly published Disney Adventures collection. So I figured since I'm doing this one solo, why not bring on somebody who's a huge Darkwing Duck comic fan? We've had him on before to talk about comics. Welcome back, Stan Lunn.
Hello, Mike. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, welcome back. How you doing, buddy?
I've been all right. Just trying to beat the Vermont heat.
Yeah, it's been really hot up in New York. We've been hitting 100-degree real feels for a few days now. Work is kicking my butt. It's a very exhausting summer. Haven't really gotten to do a lot of fun things, but, I've been trying to keep busy. How about you?
More or less the same, still getting little things here and there for the collection, waiting on the Q figure to drop.
Really looking forward to that Negaduck one.
Yeah, that'll be coming out in September, I think.
I didn't even order the Darkwing, but the Negaduck one was a complete priority. I'm sure the Darkwing one will be easy enough to get, but gotta get that Negaduck.
Well, I ordered both of them.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll get both, but Negaduck was definitely my priority. That one looks awesome.
I think they did a really good job with him. I'm very happy that they didn't just repaint the Darkwing as Negaduck and call it a day, that they actually changed it enough.
No, that face is great.
Yeah.
That is a perfect Negaduck face. The only thing he's missing is the chainsaw, but I doubt Disney was going to approve that.
Yeah, that's more than likely why he doesn't have his handy-dandy chainsaw.
Yeah, that wasn't going to get through licensing. But still, I think it looks awesome. Before we start talking about the Chaos God saga, a random question I wanted to ask you. I know you love pop culture. I know you love movies. Stan, what's your all-time favorite movie?
Probably Star Wars, but it's followed very closely by the Back to the Future trilogy and the Ghostbusters duology.
Nice. So Star Wars is on top?
Yes.
The first one.
New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi.
In that order?
Empire, New Hope, Jedi.
And then Back to the Future, which one? Obviously the first one first, I would assume?
Actually, much to Will's distaste, I like Part 3 the best.
Really? I rarely hear anybody say that.
I'm a bit of an oddity on that one, and a bit of an oddity when it comes to Ghostbusters. I actually prefer the second movie over the first one there as well.
Really?
Yep.
Huh. Okay. I mean, everybody has their taste. I never met someone that said they liked the second Ghostbusters more than the first. I always kind of assumed the second one was a complete bomb.
No, there's plenty of awesome things in it,
I'd have to give it a rewatch.
Yeah. I recommend maybe around New Year's Eve?
Maybe. That sounds like a good idea. Is that streaming anywhere?
That I'm not sure about. Though, if I had to guess, probably Paramount Plus.
That's the one streaming service I don't have. I have way too many to begin with. I can't afford any more.
So one thing I wanted to bring up real quick, just a quick mention, is I believe just a couple days ago was the second anniversary of the St. Canard Files.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Second anniversary. Man, has it really been 2 years?
It doesn't feel like it, does it?
It really, really does. And I feel like it was only yesterday that Will first called me up and's like, hey, man, I love Quackerjack. You love Quackerjack too? I love Hot Spells, man. And that was like our first conversation. And who knew it was going to lead to 2 years talking about this? I really had no idea.
It's been one heck of a roller coaster.
And I'm glad that we were able to, meet a lot of friends in this fandom. I mean, that's an awesome byproduct of all of this too.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's been 2 years, man. It's just crazy. And we're a few weeks away from Darkwing's 30th anniversary, which is obviously much more important. So yeah, happy 30th, Darkwing. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get a little bit closer to that. The main reason I asked you what your favorite movie was because earlier this week, at the time of this recording, obviously, I attended a 40th anniversary screening of The Great Muppet Caper.
I saw you were very excited about that.
And I mentioned on Facebook, for anybody who saw that, it took finally seeing that in a theater to convince myself that it's my favorite movie of all time. Like, I didn't think it was, but now that I've seen it in the movie theater, it's definitely my favorite. I love this film.
Yeah.
I think it's the best because Jim Henson directed it himself, and it's just a really fantastic movie. But enough about Muppets, enough about Star Wars and all that other stuff. This is about Darkwing Duck, and we are talking about the 5-part comic story Legend of the Chaos God, originally printed in 5 issues of Disney Adventures magazine, now reprinted for the first time in the Disney Afternoon collection, Justice Ducks and Other Stories, published by what's the name of the publishing company?
Fantagraphics.
Fantagraphics. I almost said Fantasiagraphs. Fantagraphics. Yes, they do a lot of Disney and Uncle Scrooge stuff. So it's really nice. They did this. This is volume 1. I've heard from somebody who worked on this. We might be getting more, so let's keep our fingers crossed. But this is the big reason to pick this up. There's a lot of cool stuff in this, a Goofy movie adaptation, the Justice Ducks adaptation, some Gummy Bears, Bonkers, Ducktales, Rescue Ranger stories. But this is the reason you're picking this thing up. Let's not even beat around the bush, Stan, right?
Yeah, because I had Justice Ducks already. I actually didn't own all 5 parts of the Chaos God, so I'm glad to have it, especially with the little fixes they implemented along the way.
Yeah, most of the stories in this collection got fixed. I mentioned a couple of episodes ago that Negaduck shotgun in the Justice Ducks story got repainted to look less like a real gun, which isn't technically a fix. It's more of a censor, thing. But
yeah,
but you noticed a really big edit, a fix in this story we'll get to at the end. But this entire saga, all 5 parts, were written by Bobby J.G. Weiss and David Cody Weiss. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. Husband and wife writing team, and the stories were drawn by Cosmic Quartieri. All these people were mainstays of the Disney comics in the 90s. A lot of the best stuff in Disney Adventures, the Disney Comics issues, a lot of the stuff was written and drawn by them, and they were in charge of all of this. This was a big project for the Weisses. I think it's fantastic. And each part features a different Disney afternoon show. We've got Tailspin, we have Rescue Rangers, Goof Troop, DuckTales, and Darkwing. Saving the best for last, definitely.
Yep.
So the first part is called Crystal Chaos. It's the Tailspin story. It was in the July 1994 issue of Disney Adventures. Stan, you want to give us a really brief synopsis of this story?
Sure. So Baloo, Kit, and Molly are flying to the island of Rack and Ruin to meet Professor Potsherd.
By the way, Rack and Ruin is a play on the phrase Rack and Ruin, which is the definition of that. I'll just read it verbatim. It's something that falls into a state of complete disrepair or destruction. And Potsherd, That definition is a broken piece of ceramic material, especially one found on an archaeological site. These are the kind of puns you would definitely have gotten on the Disney afternoon shows, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So continue with the storyline, Stan.
So Professor Potsherd has found the lost temple of Doom and Gloom, which is another pun on doom and gloom.
This one's a lot more obvious, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, their civilization disappeared, so he's been excavating artifacts. Of course, who else would show up to try and steal the artifacts but the incredible Don Carnage?
I mean, it's a cameo, but he makes it work.
Yeah. But, Baloo ends up chasing them off, saving the artifacts. But in the process, the crystal setting gets knocked into an empty sugar barrel, and the frame is knocked into the ocean.
Right. So what happens next?
Well, after that, they pick up the empty supplies, and I believe they also grab the crates of museum artifacts that were there and bring them back to Cape Suzette.
Yeah, they bring them over to Hire for Hire, and of course Becky chews out Baloo.
Yep.
One thing I'm going to say right off the bat, the writing on all of these stories is really good. I can hear the character voices in my head.
Yeah.
There's a point where Becky starts chewing out Baloo, and Baloo's like, "Not this again," and she says, "Yes, this again," and I could straight out hear Sally Struthers in my head. And so it turns out the crystal, the red crystal, when you touch it, you basically get possessed by the Chaos God. What's the Chaos God's name?
Salego.
Yes, so he possesses her and forces her to drive away in the Sea Duck.
Yep.
And we get a really cool action scene where she's flying the plane and Baloo, Kit, and Molly are hanging onto the back of it for dear life. I can totally picture it happening from the show. Just the Disney Japan animation as the Sea Duck's flying all over and Baloo's hanging on for dear. It really, really works. I mean, these stories are short, but they pack a lot in them.
That they do.
So how does this story wrap up?
Well, Molly ends up falling. Kit tries to save her, but the weight of two people causes him to go out of control.
Is that canon? Has that happened to him before?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't watched enough Tailspin to really remember.
We'll have to talk to Bill.
Yeah.
He'll help us with that one.
Oh, yeah. But in any case, though, Rebecca's strong willpower actually overpowers Salego's control over her, and she manages to save Kit and Molly.
Right, and when Molly jumps on her, she drops the crystal, and she's not possessed anymore.
Right.
So they have Kit drop it in the ocean.
Yep, and thus ends part 1.
It's really important that Tailspin happen first for a really obvious reason. When does Tailspin take place?
In the 1930s.
So it absolutely has to take place. It has to take place first in the storyline. But, even though Tailspin at this point was one of the older shows, it's really well written. Again, I can hear these character voices in my head. It's a great start to the storyline. We also very briefly meet Professor Potsherd's son.
Yep, Biss Potsherd.
So he comes back a little bit later. Really clever how they introduce him early on.
Yep.
The second part is the Rescue Rangers part. This one is called To Have and Have Not, which was printed September 1994 in Disney Adventures.
Yeah, it skipped a month because of the Lion King adaptation.
I remember how big Lion King was. I can forgive it for skipping a month for something like the Lion King.
Yeah, though the sad thing about that, though, is the issue with that skip, it made the final part fall on issue 51. I think the story was originally meant to be a Disney Adventures 50th issue special.
That wouldn't surprise me. Like, that makes complete sense. But it also makes complete sense to postpone it for Lion King, because how could you not?
Yeah.
I mean, the summer of the Lion King, that was something else. I don't know if you remember that, but that was big. So, part 2, I'm going to say, is probably the weakest part.
Yeah, and it does have its fair share of little goofs in it.
I don't know what it is about Rescue Ranger comic stories. I don't know if there's just something fundamentally off about the show that makes it hard to write comics for, because I have the entire Disney Comics run and I've read a lot of the shorter stories and the different like collections. I haven't really run across many great Rescue Ranger comic stories. I don't know what it is about the show. But this is definitely one where this is the weakest link in the entire thing.
Yeah.
So you want to give this one a quick rundown what happens in this story?
Sure. So it starts with a fish spitting out the crystal with Salego in it. And this is where the first goof happens. There's no chain attached to the crystal anymore. It won't be in this story, but for some reason it reappears right in the beginning of the next part of the story.
Do you think this part was phoned in at all, you know?
Maybe a little.
The odd problem they have to overcome is that Rescue Rangers doesn't take place in an anthropomorphic animal universe.
Right.
So they kind of just fudge it. They say, "Oh, to heck with it," because in the beginning of the story we see dog-faced characters.
Yeah.
One of them looks a lot like Dijon from the Ducktales movie.
Is that the fisherman?
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought I had seen him somewhere before.
yeah, that's definitely Dijon. So most of the story takes place in the museum. Who's going after everything this time?
So Fat Cat and his goons are trying to steal the setting.
Right. And of course, the Rescue Rangers are hot on his trail.
Yep.
Again, this is
And
this is. I'm having trouble hearing the character voices in this one, except Gadget. Like
yeah.
Gadget comes across pretty good. The rest of them, yeah, but Gadget comes off fine.
Now, is it just me, or does that Cobra on the Jade Block kind of look like Jafar's Cobra form, or maybe Clang from Tailspin?
Both is possible. I'd say Jafar is more likely only because that was more well known. But it's anything's possible, right?
Yep.
So what happens here? A lot of this story is a lot of just characters running around. There isn't a lot of plot. But that was Rescue Rangers, wasn't it? Basically, that show was lots of characters just running around.
Yeah.
So I know Gadget gets possessed for like a fraction of a second, and so does Fat Cat, but it's mostly Dale.
Yeah.
By the way, is there a voice actor you hear in your head when you hear Salego talk?
Not particularly, though. I want to say I kind of gave him a Judge Doom voice when I read this.
Oh, for me, it's some combination of Tony J and Tim Curry.
Ooh, I like that.
Like Tony J, definitely his like Frollo voice, but Tim Curry, like what voice can I think? Like more like his Long John Silver voice from Muppet Treasure Island, not Taurus Bulba, but some combination of that I kept hearing in my head whenever I had to read Salego's voice.
Yeah.
So how does this one? There's not much that's going on here. The big thing is we learn the metal casing and the jewel cannot touch because that will bring Salego back.
Yep.
It almost happens.
Almost.
Fat Cat gets a hold of it. He almost does it, and then he gets hit with a Tesla coil, and he drops them.
Yeah, that was the Van de Graaff generator.
This story is trying to teach you things.
Oh yeah, between that and Archimedes' screw.
Yeah. It's if I was to skip, I mean, you have to read all of them, but if I was to skip any stories, it would be this one. In the end, they have two crows. One's supposed to drop. Is it the casing in the river, in the ocean, and the jewel's supposed to be dropped into the sewer, right?
Yeah. Though I will say, I don't think those were crows. I think they were ravens, because the names are Edgar and Alan.
Right. I thought of crows because there were numerous crow characters on Rescue Rangers, so I slipped up there. You definitely ravens, Edgar and Alan. Yeah, obviously right there. But so the next part is called Spookus Ex Machina. a play on the phrase
Yep.
Deus Ex Machina. This is the Goof Troop story.
Yes,
And
it
if
is.
you were to go into this thinking, ugh, it's Goof Troop, you'd actually be wrong.
Yeah,
Like,
it's pretty good. And
this is really good.
yeah, I've got more of a soft spot for this story because I'm a fan of possessed car movies like Christine. And that's basically what this whole story in this part is.
Yeah, basically. But you know what? I could see this working as a Goof Troop episode. The characters, like the writing of all of Goofy's dialogue makes it sound just like Goofy.
Yeah.
And even I can hear Jim Cummings in everything Pete's saying. I mean, they even have Pete and Peg doing their like little cutesy pet names back and forth. Like when Peg shows up, I can hear Peg's theme music in the background in my head. It's a good Goof Troop story. So basically, Pete bought a new car,
Yep.
and this Lego jewel fell into the radiator of the car and has possessed the car.
Yep.
And the whole thing is Pete bought the car, he butters up Peg. Peg actually likes the car. It's a very fancy car that can wash itself. It has a
Yeah.
voice, and
Has a
Pete doesn't.
computer brain.
Yeah, but Pete doesn't realize the car is quote unquote haunted. Goofy does though. Um, and Max and PJ have a very brief cameo in this. I guess they would have to be in there, but very, very briefly. And so Pete has so many great lines in this about like Goofy being so stupid he can hardly believe it. Like
Yeah.
it's good stuff. Again, I can hear a lot of Jim Cummings. I love when Goofy's watching the news. He's not watching the news. What is he watching?
He is watching a certain masked mallard. They don't come out and say his name, but I am the magnet that sticks to your refrigerator.
Yeah, I think he's probably fighting Megavolt, just based on the dialogue we hear.
Most likely. I will say I did do some research, and that line is exclusive to this comic. So it's not one of the 91 episodes, unfortunately.
Nice. Hey, it's cool they came up with new ones though.
True.
And it kind of, even though this is supposed to be part of like all the same universe, it was established on Goof Troop that Darkwing is a TV show in that universe, considering there are scenes of Darkwing on TV and in the newspaper, and Max owns a Quackerjack watch.
Yep.
So I guess it kind of works that Goofy would be watching Darkwing Duck. And so it turns out the metal frame for the jewel is in Duckburg. So Salego knows that's where he's got to go.
Right.
So there is this great scene of Goofy trying to kill the car using the various techniques he's seen in monster movies.
Yep. Garlic, water, salt, silver bullets, but hopefully a quarter will work, and a wooden stake to the heart or hood.
And yeah, since cars don't have hearts, Goofy drives it right into the hood. And he's like, I guess it didn't kill it. And Pete's like, no, but I'm going to kill you. Really, really funny. Like, this feels like a Goof Troop episode. Definitely feels like a Goof Troop episode. So the car ends up dragging them inside and almost drives off a cliff with them inside.
Well, it drives off the cliff, but they thankfully escape right before it does.
Yeah, and like many a Goof Troop episode, Pete's out a lot of money.
Yep.
Yep, he goes home crying in Goofy's arms. But unfortunately, Salego and the car are laying in a heap on the ground. So it's got to get to Duckburg somehow.
Well, thankfully for Salego, Spoonerville's towing service and Floyd will be his white knight.
Yep, because he uses the car phone, which seems like such an obvious thing now, but I would think in 1994, that's high technology back then.
Back then, it sure was.
So here we go with part 4 from November 94. The title is Tow for Broke. Obviously a play on the phrase go for broke. This is our Ducktales story. And from what I was able to find out, this is the very last written Ducktales story from that era of Disney Comics. Like, this is the end for Ducktales.
Yeah.
Because they weren't in the Marvel Comics issues, right?
You mean the Disney afternoon ones?
Yeah.
I don't believe they were, but I could be wrong about that. It's been a while since I've read all those.
if they weren't, then this is the very last gasp of DuckTales of this era. But
Yeah.
it's a decent story though, with a really large role for Fenton. And a very in character role for him too. I like the story a lot. So how does this one begin, Stan?
So Pete's car has been towed to the money bin, and of course Scrooge is not very happy with it because he didn't want a broken car towed to the money bin.
Of course not. Scrooge, of course, is wearing his red jacket because why not?
Yep.
But Fenton isn't colored correctly either.
Yeah, I didn't really remember how, in terms of his colors. I knew Scrooge was off and that the nephews were a little off.
Fenton's suit is combinations of purple, oranges, and greens. Here it's more of just blues and purples.
Ah.
So what happens?
Well, Fenton ends up, trying to plead Mr. McDuck's case, but getting pretty much nowhere. Floyd goes to get a nap, and Fenton gets possessed.
Yes, he finds the jewel, he picks it up, and he's able to get just enough of his free will to scream,
Blathering blatherskite.
yes, oh, I love it. It's such a short scene for Gizmo Duck, but it's awesome. The Gizmo suit shows up, and unfortunately, Salego possesses the Gizmo suit and pops Fenton right out of the television monitor in the stomach.
Yep.
So now Salego takes over the Gizmo suit and all the technology within.
Yes, he does.
And the nephews show up, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, colored with black shirts. Because of course they are. It's a DuckTales comic in the 1990s. Why wouldn't they be?
Yep, but they give Salego a little bit of info he wants because he's looking for the money bin and he didn't realize he was already there.
Yeah, he shows up, immediately turns around and heads toward the money bin, and they think he's Gizmo Duck for a brief second.
Until they find Fenton and think he's dead.
Yeah, which is an odd moment when they're like, could he be dead? It's like, come on, it's DuckTales. He's not dead.
Yeah.
And so then Salego starts attacking the money bin. Of course, you have to have an attack on the money bin.
Yeah.
Tears it straight open. The cops show up. They think Gizmo Duck has turned bad. And Salego gets the heck out of there as fast as he can, doesn't he? Because he doesn't feel the casing anywhere around.
Right.
So then we get a lot of exposition. If there's one thing I don't like about the story, half of it is exposition.
A bunch of it courtesy of the Junior Woodchuck guidebook.
Yeah, what do we learn, basically? Basically, the shorthand version, what do we learn?
That Salego was the most powerful sorcerer in the world.
Right.
And that it got to a point where saying his name was considered bad luck.
And that's where they came up with the phrase, the Chaos God.
Yeah.
And what they learn more when Professor Poshard's son, Bisk, shows up. And him and Scrooge are old friends. Scrooge had found the casing, the metal casing when he was scuba diving in 1972, he says. Or is it 62?
It was 62 off the coast of Wowie Zowie.
That is definitely a very grown-worthy DuckTales name, for sure.
Yeah.
And he had it in his money bin for a while, but he sent it to a jeweler in
St. Canard.
Yup. And we do get more info about what happened to Salego.
Yeah, a wizard named Deshane created the crystal casing, and he confronted him and split him in two.
Yes, they don't explain how.
Right.
But yeah, he was split in two. He was the pieces were encased in a block of jade. And then of course they explain what happened with Baloo and everything, all those decades ago. And now of course they have to stop Salego before he gets that casing and puts them both together.
Yep.
And there's only one person in St. Canard who can help now.
And that is Darkwing Duck.
It shows just how important I think everybody at Disney knew Darkwing Duck was, that he was saved till the end. Like, they make a big deal about this at the end of the story. It has to be Darkwing Duck. Who else could it possibly be?
And
All
the
right.
Dark story is certainly one of, if not the best part.
Oh, absolutely. I have a soft like you. I have the soft spot for the Goof Troop one, but the Darkwing Duck one is great. So here we go with part five: Rain and Thunder. Rain spelled Reign, as
Yep.
opposed to Rain Rain. This is in December 1994, and again, it's our Darkwing Duck story. And like many Darkwing Duck episodes, where do we begin?
We begin at Shush headquarters.
So again, like many of the Darkwing Duck comic stories, this one's heavy on Shush. There's no Goslin. So if you go into the storyline expecting Goslin, she's not here. But Darkwing and Launchpad are, and they're pretty well in character. I can hear their voices throughout all of this. I can totally picture Jim Cummings and Terry McGovern saying this dialogue.
Yeah, definitely.
So they're talking to Jay Ganderhooter. Haven't said that name in a while because he hasn't been on the show in a while. And then who should burst in the door?
Fenton.
It seems like he was the only character who was allowed to cross over, mainly because he already did cross over on the show. The writers were told they could not cross characters over. The only thing that could cross over was Salego himself. But I guess since Fenton and Gizmo Duck already were part of Darkwing Duck, this was okay.
Yeah.
So take it away. We all love Darkwing. What happens in this story?
So Fenton shows up and, he says they need to get to the jewelers. And I love that Launchpad makes a little thing. Doesn't he have low-paid menial flunkies for that sort of thing?
He did when I was employed by him.
Unfortunately, they don't make it to the jewelers before Salego does. And I love that it's the McDuck Jewelers.
And I love Darkwing's entrance. It's a unique line, and it's so unbelievably true to the show. He shows up. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the blister on the pinky toe of crime. He said lines similar to that, like the pustulant blister that bursts in your boot. But this phrasing is unique to this story. And then says, I am Darkwing, and then Salego hits him with Gizmo Duck's boxing glove. And knocks him out of the panel. Oh, just so true to the show.
Oh, yeah.
Just getting whacked by something before he's able to say duck. So a fight breaks out, and tell us what happens, Stan.
Well, Salego has combined the pieces and is reborn. And he starts getting into it with Darkwing. Of course, Darkwing, starts annoying him immediately.
Well, Darkwing is full of dialogue as he fights his villains, and it's all some sort of insult. He references Megavolt.
Yep, he knows a guy who eats power companies for breakfast.
I mean, when you fought guys like Megavolt and Liquidator and Negaduck, Salego doesn't seem that threatening.
No.
And he reveals his true form, by the way. He gives up the Gizmo suit, and now we see what he really looks like.
Yep.
Like a lizard, like some sort of reptile.
Exactly.
And Darkwing is totally dissing what he looks like. Dissing his outfit, dissing his hair.
Yep, better hair on a hard-boiled egg.
And, of course, now that he ditched the Gizmo suit, Fenton gets back into it and just makes Darkwing's day all the more annoying.
Oh, I love this little line, though, where Darkwing says something about, trying to... I forget what he says, but Launchpad makes the quip, fatal for who? Him or us?
Yeah, Darkwing starts to realize he's outmatched. Like, he absolutely starts to realize this is too much. And Salego is bringing basically an army of just objects and like electric appliances and stuff. I can't quite tell like what he's trying to... I know he's trying to take over the world, but there's this big splash panel of chaos all over the streets.
Control of everything in the city.
Yeah. I wish we had seen a little bit more of that. But what we do get is pretty cool.
I do wonder, though, did you notice one thing in the background of that splash panel?
No, what was it?
Beakless monsters.
Beakless monsters? Oh, people.
Like actual human beings.
Hideous beakless mutants.
Yep.
I didn't notice. I wasn't looking close enough at that page. Oh, that's pretty funny when that happens.
I mean, most of the people are, dog faced, but there's at least one couple inside a store. You see them through the window, and they're just regular people.
I wonder if that was intentional or it was just like it was one of those whatever moments. Let's just put people in there.
It could be.
So Salego blows up the Gizmo Duck suit,
Yep,
and Fenton comes flying out of it in a way where I guess Darkwing and Launchpad didn't see.
possibly because they're like, you disintegrated him.
And then he says to Darkwing, "I want to fight you solo." And Launchpad says, "What am I, chopped liver?" So what does Salego turn Launchpad into?
A plate of chopped liver.
That is great. It's like Jafar. Like, remember the end of Aladdin?
Yeah.
Unraveling carpet, turning Abu into a toy monkey. It reminds me a lot of that. But of course, the villain has to get defeated. And
Yep.
much like many of Darkwing's villains' defeats, it's kind of an accident, kind of not. How is Salego defeated?
So he zaps at Darkwing and hits a satellite dish, and the satellite dish turns the attack back on him.
And splits him back into the jewel
And the
and metal
medallion.
casing. Yep, and
Yep.
that's it. Salego is defeated.
And
Now,
thankfully, Gizmo Duck and LP return to normal,
and Launchpad says he's never eating liver ever again.
which I don't blame him. I wouldn't even eat it to begin with.
But we know Launchpad's a food monster. He eats everything.
Yeah.
So there was a big art mistake in the original publication of the story that's corrected here. Explain to our listeners what it is, Stan.
So in one of the last few panels, like the second to last page, they have a group shot of everyone at Shush. And in the original version, Fenton is standing next to Gizmo Duck, which Fenton is Gizmo Duck. He wouldn't be standing next to him.
How would you make a mistake like that?
Well, I would say if you didn't know the show, which that's the only way I can think of.
I guess it's possible, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so how do they fix it?
in terms of the new version,
Yeah.
they probably did some digital editing to remove Fenton, from it, so it's just Gizmo Duck there.
I'm glad that they did that though, because that was very distracting. Because I've read the original. I don't own the original, but I've read it online, and that is very distracting.
Yeah, and it's one of a few different changes that they made. Like in the original version, Jay Gander Hooter's hair was orange. They changed it to the correct gray color. They changed Monterey Jack's face through half of the Rescue Rangers part, so it all matched.
Yeah, it's nice they went back in and corrected some of the art, especially because in Disney Adventures and in stuff like Colossal Comics, this stuff was printed digest size. This is a full-sized book.
Yeah.
So mistakes going to stand out a lot more. But it's nice to read this like in a large book form. You can really appreciate the art a lot better.
Yeah.
And the text is a lot easier on the eyes too.
Now, there is one other error I was going to mention.
What is that?
It's kind of a thing where the cover for the Goof Troop story showed Pete possessed, but obviously it was the car that got possessed.
Right. Yeah, I guess they wanted to entice you to read it by showing a character getting possessed when it really didn't happen. Although, can you imagine a possessed Pete?
That would be kind of scary.
Put it in the show, have him animated by Disney Australia. That would have been pretty awesome.
Now,
I would have that would have been one of my all-time favorite episodes.
Now we almost got a sequel to this story.
I heard something about that. Would you care to elaborate?
So in an interview once, Aaron Sparrow mentioned that he wanted to do a sequel to this story for the Joe Books Darkwing run.
I did hear that. I didn't hear much else about it. Did he say anything else?
I don't believe so, but we did eventually get to see Salego.
Where?
In the Ducktales episode, of the Duck Knight Returns.
No, Let's Get
Or
Dangerous.
no, Let's Get Dangerous. You're right.
Yeah.
I had the right one in my head, but the wrong title.
They're both fantastic episodes starring Darkwing Duck. So how can you go wrong with either? But yeah, they find out Salego. Where do they see it? In the Junior Woodchuck Guidebook, right?
Yep, because the artifact, the missing mystery they were after was called the Salego Circuit, and it was created by the mad thinker Salego. And his illustration, different origin, but the illustration in the Junior Woodchuck Guidebook looks a lot like Salego's combined form once the two pieces are joined.
Great shout out. It's one of those things where, yeah, you'd get like the Tailspin and Rescue Ranger references, but how many people, especially younger audiences, are going to get that reference?
Or even some of the older Darkwing fans, if you didn't read the comics, you'd have no idea.
Yeah, I would say in terms of obscurity, this one was right up there with the Fluffy Dogs reference.
Yeah.
Like, definitely, it shows how much of a super fan these guys actually were. And of course, in the write-up at the end of this saga in the new collection, David Cody Weiss actually writes about writing this storyline, and he wraps it up by mentioning that all these decades later, Salego got to appear on Ducktales, and they include a photo of Salego from that episode.
Yeah.
Which it's nice to see the Disney stuff come full circle from all of this to the new DuckTales. And I'm calling it new DuckTales when this thing's been over for months already.
Yeah. I mean, at least until a new DuckTales comes out.
DuckTales 3.0.
Yeah.
But we're still waiting on that Darkwing reboot. Not really much in the way of news yet.
Not yet. Maybe at some point. Maybe they're waiting for the 30th anniversary to reveal something.
I feel like we have to learn something soon. It's been almost a year since we first heard about this. Something's gonna give. It would be cool if we found out next month for the 30th. You're right, that would be really cool. So all things considered, taking all 5 parts together, what do you think of the Chaos God saga?
Well, if I were to give it a gas gun score, I would probably give it a 4.
Okay. Why would that be?
Well, I think it was a very good story. I like the idea that instead of having the different universes cross over, which would have been much more messy and hard to do, there was an item being passed from story to story. It gave it a sense of continuity without, some of the tricky things like, okay, well, how are we going to incorporate Tailspin in if it's 30 years? How are we going to incorporate Rescue Rangers when they live with humans?
I think even if Disney didn't mandate it, I'm glad. I'm glad they went in this direction. I hope that's what they would have done even if Disney didn't demand it.
Yeah.
So in terms of my gas canister ratings, I think I'd give it a 4 too. The only reason I wouldn't give it a 5 is because the Rescue Ranger segment drags it down a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that one is very meandering and it doesn't get the characters, but that's just inherent in a lot of Rescue Ranger stories. I don't know what it is about that show and those characters that lack the depth that doesn't make them work in comic form. I think Rescue Rangers worked in animation. Comics, the characters just aren't developed enough to work. And whenever they adapt it in comics, nobody quite knows what to do with them. And you see it in the story.
Yeah, it's like I can definitely pick out, comics of almost any of the other ones, comic stories I like. Out of all the Rescue Rangers comics I've read, which would be Disney Adventures, the original Disney Comics ones, the Boom Comics, I have a hard time picking out any of those that I read that's like, yeah, that's Rescue Rangers.
I don't know what it is, because even the show itself doesn't stand up to marathon watching. And I say that despite the fact that I enjoy the show and I grew up with it and I'm nostalgic towards it. But I think I'm at the point in my life I would definitely put Tailspin way above it. And even this Goof Troop story, just going on this one story, it's solid. Don't skip even if you aren't a big fan of Goof Troop, don't skip this story. I mean, it could have been worse. I mean, Bonkers could have been in this.
Oh, that would definitely not have made one person happy.
I know, right? I don't know. You couldn't have done Bonkers. That wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have. I don't know how you would have done that.
Yeah, I don't really see it really working either, unless maybe it was like a one-page gag comic where Salego shows up and just zaps Bonkers into nothing, and then, okay, next part.
For all things considered, this is a very respectful story toward all of the shows.
Yeah.
Especially Darkwing Duck. Leaving him to the end, making a big deal out of him. It's great. I'm so happy it's finally been republished for new fans to read. Because it deserved to be.
Yeah, definitely did. Should we rate Salego as well?
Fine, go for it. What would you rate him?
I would rate him. He's a little tricky because most of the time he's just possessing people. You know, You don't really get to see him shine until that final issue when he comes together. But I think I'd give him a solid 4. I think if he had been, whole sooner, he would have gone up in score.
See, it's so hard to rate a character like this who only appears in the comic, because the two things that would have brought this guy over the top would have been the voice acting and the animation, and we get none of that here.
Right.
It would be like only knowing Murloc from the DuckTales movie from a comic and not getting the animation and the Christopher Lloyd voiceover. So you would lose two big things of what makes that character work. Same thing with Taurus Bulba.
Yep.
So if Salego had been in a show and voiced by, Tony Jay or Tim Curry, and was animated in Japan or Australia, he'd be a 5-star villain. Absolutely. But since he doesn't have any of that, he's just a drawing on a page, and he only shows up as himself in only the last story. I can't really give him more than a 3. I think if he was on DuckTales or Darkwing as a villain on the show, he would have been fantastic. But we'll never know.
Well, at least not until maybe the reboot. Maybe they'll actually do something with him.
It's possible. I'd like to see it if they ever get a chance to do it. But I guess we've exhausted talking about Chaos God for one night. Yep. Stan, thank you very much for being my guest host and discussing it with me. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
And folks, I don't know what's in store for the next episode. It might be another bonus. I've got something else in mind that I might do while Will is away. It might be the next Darkwing episode, but it's very likely going to be another bonus. So stay tuned, but it's something cool I'm thinking of. This should be a good one. But in the meantime, we are the St. Canard Files, a Darkwing Duck podcast. You can find us on all podcast apps, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, iTunes. You can watch us on YouTube. We're on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and so many other ones I haven't mentioned because I don't know all of them, but I know we're there. You can also find our communities on Facebook. We have a Darkwing, St. Canard Files Darkwing Duck podcast group and a page just for the podcast. So we have 2 different Facebook pages. We're also on Twitter, and we're also on Instagram. So and Reddit. Yes, I always forget about the Reddit page as well. Stan, you man that one, right?
Yep.
So we're everywhere. You can find us really easy on all podcast apps and YouTube and all your social media needs. Whatever you're into, we're there. And I guess we'll just see everybody next week. Stan, thank you once again.
You're welcome.
And everybody, stay dangerous.
Stay dangerous.